Coming up on Network Africa, at least 23 people die in fresh ethnic violence in central Mali. A Rwandan man has been sentenced to 8 years in prison in the United States for hiding his role in the 1994 genocide in Rwanda. A court in Mauritania confirms Mohamed Ould Ghazouani, as the country's next president. Hello and a warm welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shovoale. We begin today in West Africa, where at least 23 people have died in fresh violence in central Mali. Officials say 3 villages were attacked by armed men on Sunday. The villages that were attacked are part of the Fulani community. In recent months, central Mali has seen several bouts of violence which appear to be tit-for-tat attacks between Fulani and Dogon communities. In June, 35 people died in an attack on a Dogon village. In reaction to previous killings, President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta has said the government will boost security. Meanwhile, the UN Security Council has unanimously adopted a resolution to extend the mandate of the UN peacekeeping mission in Mali. While the resolution did not change the mandate of MINUSMA, it did create a second strategic priority for the mission, focusing on the worsening security situation in the center of Mali, where a feud between ethnic Dogon and Fulani communities has already caused hundreds of civilian deaths. French ambassador to the United Nations, the penholder of the resolution 2480, said after the vote in the Council that the resolution calls upon the Malian authorities to immediately develop a comprehensive strategy to end the violence there and ensure the return of the state. Let's get more on this story from security expert Chidi Nwanu. Thank you so much for joining us on Network Africa. Chidi, we keep discussing this issue over and over and over again. Yet it seems the situation is even getting worse. What's going on in central Mali? Why the continuing circle of violence?
The cycle of violence in Mali continues because there is, as we've covered previously, a lack of governance and development in these areas, and also a lack of law and order. This prevents people from finding restitution for any injustice that is done to them, and it also prevents them from having confidence that the government will step in and prevent further crisis. So it leads to the formation of militias, vigilante groups, which then, attack other enemies based not so much on guilt but on ethnicity. And then with the government exacerbating this by arming certain groups, this cycle of violence can only continue.
In reaction to previous killings, President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta, he has promised to boost security to no avail, though. If nothing is done to check this violence, is it likely to have any spillover effect on neighboring countries in the region?
The spillover effect has already taken place, with, as you can see, violence now taking place not just in Mali but in Burkina Faso, in Niger, and much further beyond. This contagion is very common to this area, particularly to the Sahel, with the ease of access from one country to another, the porous borders and the huge ungoverned spaces. So it is likely that this spillover will continue, and you'll see countries that previously had suffered less from this problem, like Senegal or Ghana, beginning to see these issues arising.
Well, since the government is finding it difficult to contain this crisis, what role would you say the international community, especially countries like Nigeria and the West African region, can do to put a stop to this senseless bloodshed?
The international community can assist in this problem by providing Mali with the means with which to solve its problems, but also providing it with the guidance. So without the Malian government being able to address these issues internally and adopting the correct strategy and the correct procedures, it's unlikely that international help will be of any use. So the key that countries like Nigeria can provide is guidance in hopefully best practice, if there is any that we can look at from Nigeria that they can adopt in Mali. And also other countries can look at best practice that can be adapted to the local Malian conditions and then help them with that, as well as resources and development. So whatever development aid or military aid that can be provided, this would also be helpful to Mali.
We have to remember, though, as well, that the UN Security Council has unanimously adopted a resolution to extend the mandate of the UN peacekeeping mission in Mali. Would you say this is a step in the right direction which will help curb the killings?
The extension of the UN mandate is a positive for Mali because the international forces based in Mali provide a kind of barrier between, the complete lack of forces or the lack of competent forces that the Malian government has and a well-worked, well-developed police or military force within the country. Now, the problem with the international forces being in Mali is that whilst it provides that stopgap, unless the Malian government is using this time to expand their forces, expand their rule of law, and expand their, justice system, once those forces leave, you will have a vacuum which will be filled by, again, militias, terrorist groups, and insurgent groups.
Security expert Chidin Manu, thank you so much for your analysis and thoughts on that situation. Now to other stories. Kenyans have continued to pay tribute to Bob Collymore, the chief executive of Safaricom PLC, who turned the company into East Africa's most profitable venture. He died on Monday after a nearly 2-year-long battle with cancer. Mr. Collymore, who took the top job with the Kenyan company in 2010, oversaw an increase of nearly 500% in its share value thanks to the popular mobile money transfer service M-Pesa and a growing customer base.
I think we have been very fortunate and lucky that Bob understood what Safaricom was all about, the DNA of Safaricom, and took it to another level. I think you've all experienced Bob, his largeness, his enthusiasm, his greatness, his affinity with people, and I think that's what has driven this company and what Bob has done for this company. It's not time now to speculate on what might happen in the future. It's more now time to celebrate the life of Bob, the achievements that he made in Kenya, what he did for Safaricom, in a very different way to what I did, but probably in a bigger, more humane and more open way. So I think Safaricom is still a great company. It is still the greatest company in Kenya and will remain so. And we continue to see that it will grow with the team that you have already sitting here to my right.
Now, a Rwandan man has been sentenced to 8 years in prison in the United States for immigration fraud and perjury after hiding the fact that he was involved in the 1994 genocide in Rwanda. A statement issued by the Department of Justice says 47-year-old John Leonard Teganya was convicted and sentenced for the most serious form of immigration fraud, lying about his status as a war criminal to win asylum in the United States. In just 100 days in 1994, about 800,000 people were killed in Rwanda by ethnic Hutu extremists. They were targeting members of the minority Tutsi community as well as their political opponents, irrespective of their ethnic origin. Teganya was a medical student in Rwanda at the time of the genocide and was accused of leading teams of soldiers around a hospital and identifying Tutsi patients. He's expected to appeal against the judgment. Civil society organizations in Uganda have filed a case against the governments of Uganda and Rwanda over border restrictions between the two countries. The case against the two governments has been lodged at the East African Court of Justice, arguing that the effective border closure goes against the treaty establishing the East African Community and the Regional Community Market Protocol. The complaints want the court to rule against what they call the random border closure and that those affected are adequately compensated. They say key border towns and villages between Uganda and Rwanda have turned into ghost towns and put women traders in particular at risk of plunging into poverty. Since February, Rwanda has stopped Ugandan goods entering its territory and prevented its citizens from crossing into Uganda. Kigali says this is because of renovations of a border post, but it comes at a time of increased tensions between the neighbors. The two governments are yet to respond to the suit. Let's get more on this story from a senior lecturer of international law at the Nasarawa State University, Mr. Chukwuemeka Eze. Thank you so much for joining us on Network Africa today.
Thank you.
So what do you make of the suit filed by the civil society organizations in Uganda over this border closure between Uganda and Rwanda?
Yes, it is not new. The East African Community Court of Justice in Arusha, Tanzania, has been hearing similar suits in the past. As far back as 2011, the East African Law Society sued Kenya and Uganda for forceful repatriations and for some other issues bordering on good governance and human rights. So this is one of them. We have a very powerful NGO group in East African community. Recall that East African community has a protocol that allows for NGOs to bring matters before the Arusha court. And what they have done is, in tandem with the provisions, that before an NGO can bring such a suit, its memorandum of articles must contain, give it power to do so. And I think the three that have done so now have such in their memorandum of articles to sue Rwanda and Uganda.
Yeah, but apart from reopening the border, they are also seeking compensation for traders who they say have been plunged into poverty by this closure. How easy will this be to prove, though?
Actually, it will not be easy because these countries purport to run democracies, but really they don't run democracies. Recall how Yoweri Museveni got the third term, and they have an East African Legislative Assembly that has been in place since 2001. The matters revolving around this are within their purview, and they could have submitted these things to them to leverage upon. If it were the European Union, there would have been a lot of jojo. But these ones, they quickly make use of their military. I don't see them respecting whatever may be the outcome of the decision that will come out from that court. Even Nigeria find it difficult to obey the ECOWAS court, even situated in Abuja, the Nigerian capital, not to talk of that of East African community.
Which puts them in a really tricky situation, really. And Rwanda says this closure is due to renovations, apparently at border posts. But many people believe it's due to a diplomatic fallout between Uganda and Rwanda. But apart from this lawsuit filed at the East African Court of Justice, which you said you don't think will avail to much anyway, what other avenue of conflict resolution can be pursued in this matter?
Both of them are members of the African Union and the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. Both of them are members, and they can leverage on that. They can also go to the International Court of Justice, and I think they are members of COMESA, so Community of the Southern and Eastern African States, COMESA. So, and they can allow a third country to intervene like South Africa. But the thing is that I think there is a good problem between Paul Kagame of Rwanda and Yoweri Museveni of Uganda. I think history is just repeating itself because Milton Obote, while he was in power, oppressed the Rwandans. And based on that oppression, the Rwandan youth, many of them in Uganda, participated in the Bush War of 1980 to 1985. They helped in flushing out the forces of Milton Obote. They helped Yoweri Museveni, who was then a rebel, to come to power.
They both helped each other.
Yes, and when Kagame was fighting his own Bush War, there were ways that Yoweri Museveni also helped him. So it's quite benumbing why both of them should. And they are part of the founding members of the current 6 members of East African community.
Which asks the question, if it goes unchecked, what effect will it have on the East African
country? It will destabilize not only East Africa, but even the whole of the Great Lakes, not just East Africa, because Democratic Republic of Congo will be affected. Recall, there was a time both countries were supporting rival militias in Democratic Republic of Congo. Definitely South Sudan will be affected. It's also a member of that community. It's Kenya, Tanzania, they will all be affected.
So much to talk about. Mr. Chukwuemeka Eze, a senior lecturer of international law at the Nasarawa State University. It's always a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Still to come on the program. Scientists released genetically modified mosquitoes in Burkina Faso as part of an anti-malaria campaign. That's in a moment. Please stay with us.